So in the talk today, I want to talk about how to the power of default settings. Um, so I don't know if you know, but Google paid Apple $1 billion to keep Chrome browser as a default setting on iPhones. Now, why do they do that? They did that because we are inherently going to go with default settings on our digital devices, which is going to translate into attention, which is going to translate into dollars. I also heard another statistic recently, and I don't remember statistic very well, so roughly 80 or 90% of us do not change the default notification settings on our phones or computers. So it's kind of a mind-boggling statistic if you think about the way that larger corporate or government entities, for their own gain, not for your benefit, are setting default settings in your life. So I realized that this is something, as I'm writing personal ecosystem design, I included a section on this because your digital default ecosystem is one of your critical drivers of your attention, and where you hold your attention is where your life goes. I was thinking the other day about, how do I relate to media outlets? Because media outlets, so now we have social media where, it's constantly trying to autoplay you to the next thing, or constantly trying to ping you to something that's exciting or outrageous. I'd like to talk a little bit about outrage. So if you watch media and you're feeling outrage, most likely what's going on is your amygdala, your emotional body, is being captured by the media outlet that wants your attention. So if you're a Fox Newser or a CNNer or an NPRer or anything, doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, although the right tends to push the outrage button a little bit more than the left. They both push the outrage button though. If you're stuck on some sort of news feed or some sort of media feed, I don't want to say stuck, but if you tend to be in it, you're stuck really, but we don't like saying we're stuck on things. If you're choosing to stay on a social media feed or a media feed that is creating outrage in you, you're being hacked is the best way to say it. You're being hacked by those that want you to see their side as the right side. And they want your dollars in terms of advertiser attention. So we live in a landscape now, which I'm sure you've probably heard, in which outrage and extremes drive attention. And so it's becoming more and more normalized to be outraged and separated. And I've seen this in, my personal life, and I'm sure you have too. That if you just look around, maybe you've become this way, or maybe someone has become this way, in which their whole life is now built on this sense of outrage, and they just have to fight the outrage, whether it's outrage against Donald Trump or outrage against, the transgender agenda with children. There's just, in America, those are the way the world is divided. I was recently listening to How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, and I was very taken by the overlaps between Stoicism and Vipassana Buddhism as taught by how I learned with Essen Goenka and the tradition that came down through his lineage, which had traveled to Burma. And both of those systems are really, really focused on equanimity and giving your opponent so in Buddhism, they don't really talk about rhetoric and argument. That's more of a Western thing. That would be how the Stoics related to argument. So in these days, in the West, it's kind of, especially in America, It's all about, can you win an argument? So this is a little bit of a sidetrack. It's not about your digital domains, but it's actually really related. So I want you to hear what I have to say. So if you're getting tapped into an emotional outrage inside of a rhetorical argument, that doesn't actually mean that you're getting closer to the truth. Kind of the more emotional reactivity you have around a particular issue, the more difficult it is for you to see the nuanced truth in that issue. So I was having this intuition that somehow this debate thing that's going on, which frankly is really being pushed a lot, especially by people on the right. I think it's being pushed by people on the left a little bit less, but that's really not the point. The point is that I'm noticing this, like, we have to debate more. But it doesn't work, because debate doesn't get you closer to the truth. Debate, if it's really spacious, so for example, if it's highly structured, let's say we had a debate where, there was complete silence on one side, and then the other side had full spaciousness to speak, that might get us closer to truth. But here's the problem with that. If you study who wins debates, the person who has the most factually correct argument doesn't win. The person who wins a debate is the one who can sow enough doubt in the people who are potentially supporting their opponent. So the one that asks these questions that say something like, well, how could climate change actually be false? Could it be that we're getting the readings wrong? Are we overestimating the damage? Those kind of things. And you see, that's what's happened. And then, so this climate change argument is, it's just hype, it's overblown. And that's what the proponents of the oil and gas industry and those kind of things are effectively sowing doubt in the minds of the people that are actually trying to address this issue. So if you're plugged in by climate change, which if you're listening to me, you probably have accepted climate change as a reality. I don't think, segueing again, I don't think climate change is actually a good way to articulate the problem. The problem should be articulated in biodiversity loss and habitat destruction. So if the climate were changing and the biodiversity of the net biodiversity of the planet were increasing, I don't think that's really a problem. It might be a problem for human civilization, and we'd have to adapt to the changes in the climate, but we're pretty adaptable, so I think we would get through that. But when you're fundamentally degrading the biodiversity of the earth, then the whole system, which is so complex, there's so many arguments that want to argue for a false simplicity rather than embrace the uncertainty of the true complexity of life. And that's what you find in rhetorical arguments, and that's what you find in the outrage, emotionally driven auto scrolls in your default digital and media world. These sound bites and these outrage tags, which oversimplify things, give you this sense of simplicity that gives you like, oh, I understand that. That's the way it works, rather than living in the uncertainty of this is really complex. And I don't really know how this is going to work out. People don't like to live that way. It's inherently a higher level of consciousness. So in Stoicism, you develop this equanimity, and you allow for those who do not agree with you to have their perspective, and you come from a place of peace and respect and character. And in Buddhism, it's the same thing. You're digging in deep and seeing how you're reacting. Fucking bag of dicks, dude. I totally just had road rage on camera. That is so awesome. The guy was totally being dangerous. He was right behind me, and I blew it. I was talking about being non-reactive stoic, and here's the guy pulling up behind me it's breaking into like a double lane. There's another car coming, and he's starting to pass from behind me. I wasn't driving too slow, but whatever. I guess in his mind I was driving too slow. So I blew it. I was not being equanimous as I was speaking about equanimity. So the point is not to, so where I blew it the most was I completely reacted. I've had a bit of caffeine this morning. I'm feeling really energized in my body and in my mind, and all my neurons are firing good, but I'm a bit more reactive, and I missed my meditation this morning. So I flipped the guy off. Did you see me? I put my hand on the window, I flipped the guy off. No, I shouldn't have done that. I totally shouldn't have done that. But I did it. I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm just going to notice that I lost my center. I lost my equanimity. And I should have just given that person, I was reading yesterday about the Stoics, and I should have given that person just like, okay, they're being dangerous. I need to just like remove myself from the situation and not engage. But we're not always going to succeed. We're going to fail sometimes. And hopefully we don't do it in a way that really harms other people or harms ourselves. Like my business sign was on the back of my vehicle, and so that guy may do something weird if he read my business sign. I don't know. Anyways, hopefully no harm, no foul. But I think a very good lesson that I'm talking about your digital defaults, and that had nothing to do with your digital defaults. It had everything to do with this practice of developing mindfulness and equanimity in the face of life's challenges, which will be fostered or hindered by your default digital world that you've created, your personal ecosystem. And it's not about being perfect. God, we're never going to get there. I would never have anything to teach if it was about being perfect. I don't think I'll ever get there. Like at some point, no matter how old you are, somebody's going to say something, no matter how much you've meditated, that'll get under your skin and make you react. But you just keep moving in that direction of being more equanimous and alive and empowered. So I'm feeling the vitality. Like that's the thing. Like you don't want to be so equanimous that you have no vitality, and you don't want to be so taken over by your passions that you can't regulate your reactions. So it's always a balancing act. So back to the digital ecosystem. I guess the last thing I wanted to say is that this is one of the inspired this is I didn't realize that autoplay has been happening since pretty much the advent of radio. In the beginning when they played radio, they would want you to stay listening to the radio for as long as they could possibly keep you on it. So they would keep playing radio to try to keep you entertained. And then it turned to television, and then it turned to 24/7 news cycles. And now it's social media with autoplay, and then all the constant like reinforcement of trying to get you to stay on platform. So where I started this and where I want to finish this is that clearly I still have reactivity. So it's not about eliminating your reactivity, but I have more control. It's really, really good. It was really good. It's embarrassing that I lost my control on camera, but it's also a great lesson to say like, we're never gonna be perfect. But what I have done, and I'm really proud of, and I think everyone needs to get a little bit better at, including myself, is let's say I put on NPR, or I put on Fox News, or I put on CNN, or I put on YouTube, or I put on Facebook, or whatever. You have to get really good at turning it off. So it's not about completely disconnecting yourself from the world now. It's about having the capacity to turn off the autoplay in your head so that you're not sucked in to their autoplay. So one helpful way so in terms of the personal ecosystem, you want to turn off all the autoplays, turn them all off, turn off all of that auto notification from all those people that are vying for your attention, and then just have a very select few that are completely aligned and consistent with your values and what you're trying to create. And, you know, a good thing to do is to just like turn off everything and then slowly put things back one at a time. Because there's just too much. If you don't do that, you're going to be pulled in too many different directions, and you're really going to be ineffective. And then the capacity to build inside of that, now this isn't part of the ecosystem design, this is more just a skill to develop, is the capacity to just turn off. You know, you're listening to the radio, just turn it off. The minute something changes to something you're less interested in, you think less is important, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. Don't leave it on. That's really damaging to your attention and to your psyche. So boom, off, 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 press off. This is, Mike, you're no longer being interesting. Goodbye, right?